Hi, I'm Carla from Trash Imagination, and I am here to talk today again about fluffy rugs. And if you haven't seen the first video I made where I talked about all the steps to how to make a fluffy rug, I would encourage you to go watch that first. This is a great video to watch afterwards if you've already figured out that you would like to make one and you would like to be inspired. So, in recent months, I noticed I have received quite a few orange t-shirt donations, which makes me very happy because orange is one of the colors in the Trash Imagination logo. And I normally would just put a little bit of orange t-shirt in each rug and sort of spread it out a little bit, but I'm gonna get completely wild here and I want to make an all orange fluffy rug. And what you'll know from watching that first fluffy rug video is that it takes a lot of t-shirts to make a fluffy rug. It's hard to estimate because t-shirts are all different sizes, but I give a little guess that it's about 50 adult t-shirts to make a fluffy rug, give or take, because yeah, t-shirts are quite variable. So first thing I do is I sort of count and see how am I doing. I start preparing t-shirts. I think in my last video I talked about how I cut up a t-shirt. One t-shirt goes in each of these types of containers like this. And then I have, from the body of the t-shirt, I'm making balls of yarn. And then if I have very small t-shirts, they little bit bags here, there. Yeah, but so I have quite a few t-shirts, but before I start making a fluffy rug, one of the things I sometimes do is I take some of the white and light gray t-shirts that I have received in donations, and I will dye them with some fabric dye to the color that I want. And so I'm going to show you how I dye some t-shirts and what are some of the lessons I've learned while I was dyeing those t-shirts. And then later on, I'll show you how I make my full fluffy rug. So hopefully this is an inspiration for you. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about in terms of a fluffy rug, please go watch that video first, because inevitably people will ask me, this looks fun, but how do I do it? Go watch that video. This video is more about fabric dyeing and then just an inspiration video for you to make your own fluffy rugs. So this is my setup when I'm dyeing t-shirts. I have on my stove here is where I'm gonna boil water because I need some really hot water. And then I have my sink right here where I can get more water, and then also for rinsing and things like that. And then down here on the floor, I have like a really big Tupperware, let me do it this way, with a smaller one inside. And the smaller one is where I'm actually gonna put the t-shirts, but I put it inside a bigger one just because I don't want it to spill on the floor at all, like any drips or anything. So the bigger one is just to protect my floor from any drips. But the smaller one, you can see that's about how big of a container I'm using to dye my t-shirts. Okay, so the kind of dye that I use is just like this fabric dye. And usually I will use half a container each time I do this process. So I have half a container left from the last time I did this. The other ingredients you need a little bit of dish soap, and you need a lot of salt, a cup of salt. And then I have my white or almost white t-shirts that I'm dyeing, okay? And the package says that half a container of this fabric dye is good for 1 pound of t-shirts, which depending on the size, different t-shirts. Like for example, this is 1 pound. These are I've actually prepared 3 pounds of t-shirts, because what I have found is that because I'm not trying to get the darkest orange, I'm happy with kind of a medium orange. I can dye more t-shirts than it's saying on the bottle. But if you want like the dark orange, then yes, you probably would only be able to get 1 pound for half a bottle. Does that make sense? Okay, so step 1 of this process was actually preparing the t-shirts. And the way I prepared them is I removed anything that I didn't want to dye, that I won't use in my project. So for example, on this t-shirt, you can see it had a printed image on the front. I cut that off because I'm not going to use that. I cut off the collar, I cut off the cuffs, and I cut off the waistband. Now, as you know, I use those materials in a different kind of rug. You can go see that very popular video. But for this project, because it's based on pounds of fabric, I want to eliminate as much as possible any fabric that I will end up not using. So in this particular project. So that's how I get the pounds down, is by trimming off any excess parts of the t-shirt that I don't need. Yeah, so that's what I do. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna get the water boiling here. You need 3 gallons of boiling water. It says a minimum of 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, you know, not boiling, so it can be pretty hot. My 2 biggest pots here, between them, make just under 3 gallons of water. So I'm gonna get those, you know, going. I don't even have to get them all the way to boiling, but pretty warm. And then I'm gonna get the dye bath ready. So I'll come back once those are finished heating up. So while those are heating up, I just want to mention a few other things I remembered. First of all, it says you need to pre-wash all your shirts before you dye them, and these are all secondhand shirts. Plus, when they're donated to me, I wash them just to make sure. And so they are all definitely pre-washed, because some new shirts have this stuff on the fabric called sizing, and you want that to be gone before you would try to dye them. The other materials that I need is I need a stir stick, and I wear rubber gloves so that my hands do not get dyed with the color of the dye. So you might ask, why am I putting the t-shirts in this instead of just right into the pot? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is the dye product says that the t-shirts should be able to move freely in the dye bath. And so I wouldn't be able, my pots are not that big. I don't have like a big lobster pot. So I couldn't put them in there. So to get enough space so that they can move freely in the dye bath, I need something a little bit bigger. So that's why I got this. I found this in the trash, as I find all good things, it seems. The other thing is I use these pots for cooking. And so I don't want to put my dye in there. This is these are not reserved for dyeing projects. So I only want water to be in there. And so I only want the dye, because it's not necessarily a food safe product. I don't want the dye touching my pot, so I'm going to put the dye in here, which obviously I don't serve food in here. So the product says that you're supposed to put wet fabric in the dye bath. So I am actually, while the water is boiling, I'm going to start getting my t-shirts wet in the sink here, and then they'll be sopping wet, and then I can put them in the dye bath once that's ready to go. So I'm going to work on that now. Okay, so my pots of water are almost boiled or boiling. They're really hot, so it's time to start getting ready to make the dye bath. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to shake my dye. So give it a really good shake, because it's probably been sitting on the shelf somewhere. You want to get it nice and shaken up so it is sort of even. Okay, so that's well shaken, I think. That was fun. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pour the hot water in here, which I have to be really careful about because it's boiling or close to boiling. So I'm going to do that now off camera so I can focus on it, and then I'll show you what happens next. Okay, so next I need to put in a tablespoon of dish soap. Just gonna do that. Boop. I'm not really much for measuring that. And then I need to put about a cup of salt. Again, I'm not really much for measuring. I'm gonna put a bunch. That'll be good. Okay, give it a little stir. Okay, and now I'm going to pour in the dye that I shook up. Okay, here we go. Orange! So fun. Give it a stir. And that looks so nice. It's going to be so cool. I'm just going to get a tiny bit of water in here to get the last bit out. Back on. Actually, quite a bit came out there, so maybe I'll do it one more time. Okay, that looked more clear. So good, we got hopefully all the dye that we want. Now I've pre-wetted the t-shirts, so I'm just going to start grabbing them and plopping them in. So I'm going to start by putting like about a pound of t-shirts in there to start, and then seeing if they can still move freely. You can see they instantly pulled up that dye. Okay, they're still moving freely, easily. So this was the first pound of t-shirts that I prepared. Yeah, I think I could fit another t-shirt in here easily, at least one more. So I'm going to get another one wet. You can see it's a really nice color right away. The package says that you should stir it and keep it in there for 30 minutes. I usually find they get the dye on it in like 10 minutes, but you leave it in there as just following rules. But the color you see is probably the color it's going to be. So let me just get another one wet. Okay. And the first ones you put in will be the darkest, but it's not that different. Oh, I definitely can fit another one in there. Let's see. Yeah, we're fine. We're fine. So this is why I prepare more than the pound that it says. I usually can get maybe even 3 pounds, but definitely at least 2. Okay, let's get another one. And you can see that one's getting a little bit lighter. You see how that was the shirt I just put in? But that's okay. They're still moving freely, I think. Still pretty good. And you stir them to make sure that like the part that's sticking out does not dye a different color than the part underneath. I think we're getting pretty close to the max, but I'm going to try one more. So this is about 10 minutes after I've stirred it a couple times, but you can see with my rubber gloves on, I can touch the water. It's not burning my hands at all. And that's because I didn't have the water boiling. I just had it. The bubbles were starting to come up from the bottom of the pot. So I make sure I'm giving it a really good, make sure the stuff on the bottom comes up to the top, etc. And you can see these lighter t-shirts, these two went in later, so they're lighter than the other ones. And you can almost tell what order I put them in based on, like this one is the darkest, is probably the first one I put in. Also, at this point, they are darker than they will be at the end. So, you know, when I wash and dry them, they're not going to be this dark. So this nice, rich. Now, if I didn't put other t-shirts in, maybe the first two would just be dark. But because I'm trying to get a lot of t-shirts dyed in a lot of shades, a lot of dark, medium to light orange, I find this works best. Plus, then I get a lot of t-shirts dyed for less cost of the dye. So it's been about 20 minutes now, and they look great, and I have found waiting that extra 10 minutes doesn't really make any difference, so I'm going to start pulling them out. And then I give them a rinse. It says to rinse them till the water is coming out clear, so that's what I'm going to do. This is the tangerine color, if you're ordering it. One thing I want to point out here, and hopefully it comes across on the video, but this t-shirt is not perfectly dyed. There's some lighter spots. Now, if I was more worried about that, I would have stirred more, I would have put less t-shirts in, but I'm not that concerned about it because you know I'm going to be cutting this up into t-shirt yarn. So if there are some sections that the dye is not perfectly even, I don't care. I'd rather get more t-shirts that are slightly less perfect than just a few that are perfect. So just a reminder, one of the things that I like to have in my fluffy rugs is a range of colors, from lightest tones all the way up to the deepest, darkest tones. So I do want some very light colored t-shirts if possible. So let's see what happens. This is just another white t-shirt and it's wet. Let's see. First of all, you can see when I put it in, You remember what it looked like when I put it in before? This is barely orange. It's just not, it doesn't, the second round with orange just, it's not very exciting. Yeah, it's almost like beige. So unfortunately the second round, it doesn't really work with orange. But I would really encourage you to do it with, like I did it with aqua, and I got 3 baths worth of t-shirts dyed. It went on and on and on. So that's a tip if you want to get a few more dyed. Not so good with orange. So next I'm going to put the t-shirts in the wash. It says to wash them at warm water. By the way, it said to rinse them in cold water. Oh well, I did it warmish water, but anyways, I'm going to do it in warm water in here, and then you just dry it as normal and you will have dyed t-shirts. So I wanted to share the results of my fabric dyeing efforts and to show you what it looks like when they're dry as compared to you saw them when they were wet. So you can see they definitely lightened up a little bit once they were washed and dried. This was the first t-shirts that I put in, and you can see they are very dark orange and great. That's great. And then these ones went in just a little bit later in the process, and you can see they have sections that are a little more patchy. The dye is not 100% on everything, but still a lot of really nice colors. And when I cut them up for the fluffy rugs, they'll be great. Then we get into the ones that I put in at the very end, and you can see they're quite lighter. And I will still probably use these because one of the concepts with fluffy rugs that works well is if you put a mixture of light, medium, dark colors in the rug. I think it really is a good idea. Now this last t-shirt way over here, this is the one that I put in the dye bath after in that second round when I basically decided, nope, this is not dark enough. I'm not going to dye any more t-shirts in this particular batch of dye. So it's a little bit orange, but it's not orange enough. I don't think, I probably won't use that in the rug, and I would probably just put it in the dye bath again the next time that I'm dyeing with orange or a similar color. So at this point you can see that I've put the warp on the loom, and I used the pieces of the t-shirts that did not curl up the way I like them to curl up for fluffy rugs, but they're perfectly fine for the warp. This is what I mean by it, is this type of t-shirt that even when you pull it, it doesn't really curl up, it just stays limp. So I'm going to use that for the warp. You can see I did an alternating light and dark orange warp. So now I'm going to start making my fluffy rug. A few people contacted me saying that they were struggling to cut the t-shirt wool, and so I'm going to do a demo from the angle that you just saw. I unfolded everything. Then you can see how it looks from my perspective rather than looking at me. So as I did in the previous video, I'm going to put the part that's not cut across my arm, and hanging down are all the loops. Now, some people said that they were getting a series of loops rather than one long piece. So if you cut straight from here to here right now, up to that, you will get a series of loops. So don't do that. Start here, about halfway, start kind of here, and cut to that first piece, that first strip like that. So you can see it's a diagonal piece, it's a diagonal cut. If you keep following that diagonal cut like this, now you'll see it's one long thread. But if you start off wrong, you won't. You'll just keep getting loops. So the key thing is to make sure that first cut, that first diagonal cut is correct, and then cut the rest following that pattern all the way through. And then I'll just show you what to do when you get to the end. So when you get to the end, you have a shape like this. Again, you're going to cut on a diagonal up like this. Like that. So now when I start pulling, you're going to see this is one long piece of yarn. I hope that helps. So I'm about 2/3 of the way through making this rug. You can see that's how far we are, about 20 inches up. And over here you can see how I have my yarn sorted. There's a few t-shirts left, not too many. I have them sorted by color so that I can quickly grab whatever color I feel like. This is kind of like abstract painting, so I'm grabbing colors as I am desiring to have them. And you can see here it's a mix of oranges. I like to have everything from a very light color orange or almost white all the way to a dark colored orange or brown. And there's some pinky ones in there, so it's really coming along. So I finished weaving this wonderful orange rug, and I was just starting to take it off the loom, and then I realized I should probably take a quick video before it comes off. So as you can see, it looks really cool. Lots of fun colors in there. I'm loving the way it looks, and the warp made out of the t-shirts that did not roll up is working just fine. So yay. Also, if you're wondering, did I use up all that orange t-shirt collection? I made a big dent in it. You can see this is how much is left. Just 4 t-shirts left and some rolls of yarn that I will use in future projects. So here we go. There's our finished fluffy rug, and I'll just fluff it up a little bit for you there. And as I've said on previous videos, I like to have it out for a few days and look it over and just see what I like, what I would change. And I hope this inspires you to make your own fluffy rug. And if you'd like to continue to be inspired to make one, be sure to follow Trash Imagination here on YouTube.